Hello everyone, Aimer back with another Mission Impossible episode review. This time I'm reviewing Season 6, Episode 3, which is called The Tram. So this one starts with the tram heading down a mountain resort pass. A man shows up with a briefcase. His name is Rudy from Cleveland, and he's here to see underworld bosses Vic Hatcher and his muscle man, Johnny Thorne. The three head up in the tram to go up to the lodge that Vic has arranged for a special meeting. On the ride up, Vic and Johnny accuse Rudy of trying to go into business for himself, and despite his protest, poor Rudy is thrown off the tram to his death. Jim gets his instructions on a boat. The mission, Hatcher is trying to put syndicate leaders together with Thorne's help to set up a holding company that will make it nearly impossible to get at their ill-gotten funds, and the IMF must put them out of business. We get an apartment scene where we see some of the usual IMF planning, and the goal is to get Vic's Swiss bank account number. So the IMF stage an averted hit and run on Vic's son-in-law Arnie, who's taken out of the picture, saying he'll send his representative Frank Colby to the meeting with his ring for authentication. The IMF arrests Colby so that Jim can take his place, dropping Barney off out of sight near the entrance so he can infiltrate the tram garage and make some changes. On the way up, Jim adjusts some of the internal wiring, damaging the emergency brake so that technician Willie needs to be called, and goes up the tram for a test run. Hatcher tells the assembled troupe about his plans for the holding company, how incorporating it in South America will protect them, and how they'll use it to take over profitable organizations, asking for $500,000 for each man who wants in. Casey calls Johnny, posing as Johnny's girlfriend Carol, saying that her husband's in town and intending to break up their plan, so he heads down the tram with Willie, who knocks him out and puts him in the luggage compartment. As the tram heads to the lower garage, Barney gets into the compartment and pulls him out. Willie tells the guy that Johnny decided to stay up in the lodge, and he and Barney load Johnny into the van and dash off with a screech of tires. The $4 million from the assembled throng is put into Vic's safe, but not before Jim is able to distract him with pictures of the grandkids and put a device over the lock that Barney uses to detect its combination. The guys downstairs tell Vic that Johnny's missing, and Willie takes him to an office where Casey is also waiting. They call Vic and tell him to bring $4 million to a warehouse pronto, alone, or Johnny's had it. The throng is suspicious that the kidnappers would ask for that exact amount. Some ask for their money back, enraging Vic, who has a weak heart and has to calm down. Vic convinces them to pay the kidnappers, and he'll find a way to get the money back once they have Johnny again. He gets the money from the safe and promises to pay all the investors back himself if he has to. Vic heads to the warehouse as he was directed, hearing voices that direct him to drop the briefcase and walk around the place a little bit, but he finds that it's just a recording of Johnny and Barney's voices on a tape recorder. The IMF take the money and go back to the lodge, with Barney hiding in the luggage compartment with a different briefcase. As Vic arrives and heads back up, and Barney sneaks into the lodge, opening the safe and putting the IMF briefcase in it. Johnny offers Casey money to cut him loose, but she's not interested. Willie returns with $10,000, and Casey berates him for getting lowballed by the old man, insinuating that Vic is the one who arranged the kidnapping to get Johnny out of the way. Johnny tries to make Casey see that he's her best option, as Vic will have to kill her to keep everything quiet, whereas he'll protect her, as she can corroborate the story about Vic putting the hit on him, and offers her a lot more money, too. Casey releases him, and Johnny is about to stab her with a letter opener on the table, but Willie calls out and Johnny dashes away. Back at the lodge, Vic and others start surmising that perhaps Johnny is setting them up, faking a kidnapping so that he can make off with the $4 million. Jim tells the others that Arnie told him that Johnny has some heavy gambling debts, making them all wonder if that might be true. Johnny calls his man Jennings at the lodge, disguising his voice at first, and tells Jennings that Vic is behind it all, and the money is still in the safe. Jennings and the others demand the safe be reopened, and Vic has no choice but to comply. Jim signals Barney, who takes out the lodge guard. The briefcase is found in the safe with the money still there, and the group prepares to shoot Vic and Jim, who stands by him. Barney comes in from behind, rescues them, putting the others in the storage closet for a moment as he, Jim, and Vic head down in the tram. Willie sneaks back to the lower garage, while the others bust out of the closet, and Jennings warns the lower-level guards to stop Vic, who's got their money. Johnny returns and gladly joins his crew in the effort to do so. Vic starts having chest pains from the stress, and Jim and Barney take pills to protect them from the special gas that Jim sprays in the tram, worsening Vic's condition. The three see that Johnny and others are waiting for them, and Vic tells Jim to make sure his grandkids get the money. Jim tells him the money is counterfeit, and Vic continues to feel worse. Willie stops the tram down at one of the support towers and dashes away. Vic, figuring he won't make it, gives Jim his necklace of St. Francis, with his Swiss account number on it in Roman numerals, tells him to take it to Arnie to make sure that Johnny doesn't get any of the money. Barney and Jim climb down the support tower as one of the men is able to get the tram moving again. A gunfight ensues, and Johnny is hit, but so is Vic, and the IMF head away. Mission accomplished. I'm going to give this episode a grade of a D+. Starting with the good. I liked, the one thing that I thought was a bit of a highlight in this episode was that little device that Jim puts over the safe, the tumbler for the safe, that allows Barney to detect the safe combination. I had actually completely forgotten about that, and I don't recall that device being used in any other episode. Seems like it would be quite handy. I wish we had seen that sort of thing more often. Other things that are good, I don't know if I've really called them good or maybe just kind of okay. Victor French, who plays Vic Hatcher, and Felice Orlandi, who plays Donnie Thorne, they're okay. They're not great, they're just okay. There's really not the opportunity for any kind of characterization or anything like that. This one is mostly about the story itself and mostly about the tram, and I'll have more to say about that in just a moment. Well, actually, I might as well put it out there now. This tram, in doing some reading in the Mission Impossible dossier, this was located at a resort in Palm Springs, and that's where the crew did some shooting for a few days to get this episode going. The visually, the tram ride, and the scenes where we see the tram moving, and camera shots from inside the tram, that's actually pretty cool. I thought it was okay. It was kind of nice to see those things. That's going to lead me kind of into the counterpoint, and then moving on to the not so good and the bad. I think that there's way too much emphasis put on the tram as a plot device. I remember commenting back in the season 4 episode called The Numbers Game, if you remember that one. I commented that in that one that there was an elevator in the house in which the action took place. And I mentioned that elevator almost seemed kind of like a character in the episode itself. Like it was actually kind of active and drove some of the action. Here, I think it's almost exactly the opposite with the tram. Like I said, visually, it's pretty cool. But I just feel like the writers just used it as a plot device. Just, let's make it all about the tram. And the writers, I just feel this, used it more of a crutch than an enhancement to the episode. Whenever we just kind of need something that like everything centers around that, and I think it's just too much. In the Numbers Game, the elevator was used in a much, much more effective way, and I just don't feel that about this episode. And I think that kind of segs into the next point that I want to make. This is a very cookie cutter plot. It's your standard separate and mislead plot, which we have seen many, many times before. And we're going to start seeing it more and more through seasons 6 and 7. And this one is just about as cookie cutter as you can possibly get. And I think that's also part of it, a part of why this episode is not great. Because of the way I think the writers had the intention, it seems like this to me, this is my feeling coming away from watching this episode, that the writers wanted to center everything about the tram to kind of almost and again, not deliberately, but to kind of try to distract away that the plot was kind of thin, and it just doesn't work. If more attention had been played to making it more of a worthwhile plot, I think that would have been effort much better placed. The problem with this kind of plot, as I have mentioned before, and oddly enough, the last time I recall mentioning it was in the previous episode with Felice Orlandi. He was in the the season 4 episode, The Crane. And I had a similar criticism of that episode, wherein, you had two guys, like you do in this episode, who had basically been joined at the hip for a significant amount of time. And, the IMF is able to kind of drive a wedge between them, physically separate them and mislead them into thinking that each one, is trying to, off the other in a matter of hours, if even that. And they just kind of buy into it so easily, which is really, really, really a huge level of lameness. Yes, these guys are underworld types. Yes, it's all about money. Yes, it's all about power. And the IMF, I think, does a pretty decent job. Like the plot that they lay out against these guys is fairly believable, and they do a good job of executing it. But it always bothers me when the whole separation and misleading happens so relatively easily. To kind of put a bow on that, there's not really a high degree of difficulty here, even though the IMF executes the mission well, and there's no new ground that's covered here. There's nothing here that we really haven't seen before. Another thing that I noticed kind of in that vein, Barney and Willie, despite these guys, despite the Hatcher and Thorne having these guys, guarding, the lower garage and the upper level, Barney and Willie basically just make these guys look like complete idiots. They're able to sneak around the place without much concern at all. And that's another telling thing about, the very low degree of difficulty here. One final comment that I wanted to make with regards to the camera work here. The camera work on the Tram, as I mentioned, is pretty decent. But there's a lot of weird camera angles, especially during the scenes on the street where we see people driving or in cars. Just kind of these weird diagonals and these weird tilts. And then at the end, when the IMF is driving away, there's almost like a 360. I'm like, what is up with that? Who is doing this camera work? And what is the point of doing of having all these crazy angles? It's almost like and again, I only remember the show watching a couple of reruns when I was really young. Shows like Laugh-In, where they had, these weird zooms and things like that, and the camera is, going like that. But it just seems so out of place here. And I really wonder, why is that? Like, it just didn't make any sense. Anyway, I don't think there's a whole heck of a lot more to say about this one because, as I said, it is pretty cookie cutter, and there's very little, if anything, that we haven't seen before. So I'm going to stick with my grade of D+ on this one. And I think that's about it. Thank you all, as always, for watching. Please like this episode review. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and please leave your comments, and I will see you next time.